She begged her mom to keep her safe. Her mom chose her stepkids instead and left her with nothing. Imagine being 14 years old, standing in front of your mom, telling her you are scared. Not throwing a tantrum, not being dramatic. Just a kid, looking her mother in the eyes and saying the words that should have stopped everything. I am not safe. And your mom looks back at you and says, please think about their safety instead. That is not a parenting mistake. That is a choice. And the girl who had to live with the consequences of that choice is now 18, and her mom wants to act like none of it ever happened. Let me take you all the way back to the beginning, because this story does not start with a rebellion or a dramatic falling out. It starts with a little 5-year-old girl who lost her father and was handed a brand new blended family before she could even process her grief. Think about what 5 years old actually means. It means you still need someone to cut your food sometimes. It means the world is supposed to be safe and predictable and full of people who protect you. And this little girl had just lost the first and most foundational person in her life. The grief alone, at that age, with no real language to name it, would have been enormous. But her mom had already been dating this man before the loss had even settled. Things moved fast, the way things do when adults are trying to outrun their own pain. And suddenly this child who had just lost one parent was now sharing a home with 4 stepchildren who were carrying their own pain, their own trauma, and apparently a whole lot of rage that they needed somewhere to put. Here is the thing about being the youngest kid in a house full of older children who are going through something terrible. You become the easiest target. You are small. You cannot fight back. You do not yet fully understand that what is happening to you is wrong, only that it hurts and that you are scared and that you want it to stop. She was bitten. She was kicked. She was held down by the older 2 while the younger ones stepped on her. She was punched and knocked over and pushed around in what should have been her own home, in the rooms where she was supposed to feel most safe. And her mother knew. Her mother absolutely knew. The evidence was there every single day in bruises and tears and a child who flinched and clung. And her response was to tell her daughter to stay by her side at all times, like that was a real solution, like a child can be physically attached to her parent every hour of every day, like that arrangement could hold in a house with 4 other children and a life that keeps moving whether you want it to or not. What makes this even harder to sit with is that these stepchildren were also genuinely suffering. Their mother was described as a terrible person and the abuse they faced was real. That part is not in question. But here is where the mom made a catastrophic error in her thinking. She started treating the safety of her husband's children as something that had to come at the expense of her own daughter's safety. Like there was only so much protection available in that house and she had to decide who deserved it more. Like love and safety were a finite resource that ran out if you spread them too evenly. That is not how a parent thinks. That is how someone who has lost the plot thinks. A parent does not weigh her child against someone else's children and decide her child comes up short. That is not a hard call. That should never even be a call. The mom kept telling her daughter it would get better. Over and over and over again. Stay by my side. It will get better. Please think of the other kids. It will get better. Those words probably came with a tired, strained expression, the look of a woman trying to hold too many things together at once and hoping that if she just said the right thing often enough, reality would eventually cooperate. But it never got better. It got worse. Because then the stepchildren left to live primarily with their mom, and for a while there was some distance and some breathing room and maybe even something that felt, cautiously, like peace. But their father fought for years to bring them back. He pushed through the courts and the paperwork and the waiting, and when it became clear he was about to win that custody battle, this 14-year-old girl sat down with her mother and made herself completely vulnerable. She peeled back every defense she had. She said she did not feel safe. She said she was scared. She laid out in plain words the thing she most needed her mother to hear, and she begged her mother to choose her. Her mother said no. Not in those exact words. She dressed it up a little, talked about how much the stepchildren deserved safety, how their situation was so dangerous, how she had responsibilities that extended beyond just the two of them. But the answer to her own daughter's plea was still no. And that no, quiet and dressed up and delivered with the best of intentions, changed everything. What happened next shows you exactly what kind of kid she was, and I mean that with complete admiration. She did not quietly accept it. She did not fold herself down and go back to that house and try to survive it again. She ran. She ran to her grandparents, and she made it absolutely clear that she would rather go through a foster placement and a CPS investigation and interview after interview, sitting in strange offices answering hard questions from adults she had never met, than go back to that house. At 14 years old, she had the clarity of mind and the sheer determination to keep herself safe when her mother would not do it for her. She refused to get out of the car. She walked away. She said she would keep running, and she meant every word of it. That takes a level of self-possession that most adults do not have. Most adults, when pushed to the edge, when given an out, still hesitate. She did not hesitate. She knew what she needed and she went and got it herself. And then the moment that should have ended all debate happened. The CPS worker went to collect her belongings from the house. Every single thing was destroyed. Photos torn up, the little preserved snapshots of her childhood and her life. Clothes cut to pieces. Her stuffed animal collection, the soft comforting things that belong to childhood, the things you hold on to when the world feels too big, shredded. By the stepchildren. In the house she was supposed to return to. In the home her mother wanted her to go back to. Sit with that for a second. This was not an accident. This was not carelessness. Someone, or several someones, moved through that room with deliberate intention and destroyed every trace of her. The CPS worker saw it with her own eyes and understood exactly what it meant, and the counseling sessions that had been planned between mother and daughter quietly disappeared after that. Even the professionals processing this situation in real time understood what that destruction was saying out loud. For 4 years she lived with her grandparents. She had mandatory phone calls with her mother, once a week, then reduced to once a month, those conversations that feel less like connection and more like scheduled obligation. She saw therapists. Some of them helped. Some of them pushed hard for reconciliation in a way she describes as extreme, and that pressure on top of everything else was its own kind of damage. Because when you are already questioning yourself, already lying awake wondering if maybe you are being too harsh, already carrying guilt about walking away even when walking away was the only safe thing to do, and then someone in a position of authority keeps telling you to give more grace to the person who let you down, it twists the knife a little deeper every time. It makes you wonder if your own survival instincts were wrong. It makes you doubt the part of yourself that saved you. Now she is 18 and her mom is back. And her mom is saying things like we need to stop destroying our relationship. She told her daughter she never should have lived apart from her only parent. On a call where her daughter expressed that her safety as her real child should have come first, her mom said she had a sad outlook. Still, after everything. Still centering the narrative on her own feelings, her own grief, her own sense of loss. Still not saying the thing her daughter needed to hear. After 4 years, after a destroyed bedroom, after mandatory phone calls and CPS investigations, the response to her daughter's pain was to call that pain a sad outlook. I need to say something about the phrase her only parent. Her mom used those words to guilt her. But who chose to prioritize everyone else over being that one and only parent? Who was given the chance to be everything to this girl, to be the single solid thing in a world that had already taken her father, and instead asked her to shrink herself so that a blended family could feel functional? Those words should have carried weight on the speaker's side, not the listener's. They should have landed as reckoning, not as a guilt trip. Instead, they just reveal how little the mom has actually reckoned with what she did. The therapists who told her reconciliation is entirely her choice got it right. The ones who pushed hard are, with the most respectful interpretation possible, projecting an ideal outcome onto a situation that does not fit the template. Reconciliation requires two things. It requires the person who caused harm to genuinely reckon with what they did, and it requires the person who was harmed to actually want to do the work. Neither of those things is present here. Her mom still responds to her daughter's pain by making it about the stepchildren, about the family, about the relationship rather than about the harm. There is no accountability. There is no reckoning. There is just a woman who wants the relationship back without doing the one thing that could actually repair it. She is not being too harsh. I want to say that as clearly as possible. She is 18 years old and she has survived something that would have broken a lot of people. She survived abuse in her own home. She survived being told that other children's safety mattered more than hers. She survived having everything she owned destroyed. She survived years of pressure and mandatory contact and therapists with agendas. And she is still standing, still asking reasonable questions, still trying to figure out if she is the problem. She is not the problem. She has never been the problem. The verdict here is simple even though the emotions around it are not. Her mother made a choice when it mattered most and that choice was not her daughter. That choice had real consequences that played out in real time in a CPS office and a destroyed bedroom and 4 years of court-ordered phone calls. Her daughter does not owe her a reconciliation because enough time has passed. She does not owe her grace because her mom is sad. She does not owe anyone a relationship that costs her peace of mind just to make the adults around her more comfortable. If she wants to try with her mom, that has to come from a genuine desire on her part, not from guilt and not from pressure. And if she does not want to try, that is a complete and valid answer. She already did the hardest work of her life just surviving the situation her mother put her in. She does not have to do any more work on someone else's timeline. My husband sent photos of our messy house to everyone he knows to destroy me before our divorce. 9:55 p.m. Claude Respondio. He did not just take pictures, he did not just take pictures. He showed them to everyone. Not his lawyer. Not a mediator. Everyone. His family. Their mutual friends. Acquaintances. The people he works with. He walked through his social circle with photographs of a tired mother's home and he handed them around like evidence at a trial where he had already decided the verdict. Let that sink in for a second. She is 43 years old, the primary caregiver for 3 children, handling what she describes as 95% of the parenting and household responsibilities, while her husband works outside the home and frequently does overtime. She is not making excuses when she says the spring semester was too much for one person. She is describing reality. 3 kids in school, a full household to run, doing it essentially alone, day after day, week after week, with no real partner beside her to absorb any of the weight. Anyone who has ever managed a home with multiple children while the other adult is consistently absent knows exactly what that kind of mess looks like. It is not a sign of neglect. It is a sign that one person is being asked to do what 2 people should be doing. It is the natural and completely human result of being stretched past your limit for months on end. The laundry stacks up because she was helping with homework. The dishes sit because she was handling bedtime alone, again. The counters get cluttered because there is simply no second set of hands, no one coming home at a reasonable hour to say, "Let me take this from you for a while." And he chose the peak of that season to take his pictures. He did not document the house on a calm summer Tuesday when things had settled and the kids were outside and she had finally gotten a full night of sleep. He timed it. He waited for the hardest stretch of the year, the stretch he had helped create through his absence, and he captured it with the deliberate patience of someone who had already decided what those images were going to be used for. And then he took those photographs and he distributed them as widely as he possibly could, moving through their shared social world with what can only be described as intent. She says so herself that he told her exactly what the reactions were. He did not just show the pictures and stay silent. He delivered the feedback to her face. He narrated the responses. He wanted her to know what everyone thought, what his coworkers said, what her in-laws concluded, what the mutual friends whispered. He wanted her to feel every single one of those reactions land on her body like something physical. He wanted her to stand in the rubble of her own reputation and understand that he had built it. That is not building a legal case. That is a humiliation campaign. Family court judges have seen everything. They are not looking at a messy house during a busy school semester and concluding that children are in danger. What they look for is genuine risk, dangerous conditions, actual evidence of neglect, the kind that leaves marks on children, the kind that shows up in their behavior and their well-being and their records at school. Clutter and unwashed dishes and laundry piles in a home with 3 active kids do not clear that bar. They never have and they never will, because family court exists to protect children from harm, not to punish exhausted mothers for imperfect countertops. What might actually catch a judge's attention is a spouse who secretly photographs his wife, distributes those images to the widest possible audience for maximum reputational damage, and then tells her about it in detail. That is not the behavior of someone operating in good faith. That is coercive, calculated, and it has a name. Family courts are increasingly aware of what emotional abuse and coercive control look like, and a pattern of behavior designed to isolate, humiliate, and destabilize a partner is absolutely part of that picture. Judges see through strategy. They have been doing this long enough to know the difference between a father worried about his children and a husband trying to destroy his wife before she can defend herself. She needs a lawyer yesterday. Not tomorrow, not after the therapy intensive. Right now, before any more damage is done. Because while she is trying to process the betrayal and figure out how to hold herself together, while she is sitting somewhere trying to breathe through the sick feeling of knowing that her husband walked into a room full of people they both know and passed around photographs of her home like she was a problem to be solved, he has already built his narrative and distributed it. She is behind. She needs someone in her corner who understands the legal implications of what he did, who can advise her on how this plays out in a custody context, and who can make sure the record reflects not just the state of her house on a bad day but the full story of who has actually been doing the parenting in that home for years. And about that intensive therapy week. The divorce had been paused for them to attend together, which means someone in that process believed there was something worth working toward. Now she has discovered this. That timing matters enormously. Going into a therapeutic process with someone who has just done this to you is not a neutral experience. It is not 2 people sitting down in good faith to examine a struggling marriage. She needs to walk into that room, if she walks in at all, with full awareness of who she is sitting across from and what he is capable of. This was not a moment of poor judgment. This was not him venting to one person and regretting it. This was a deliberate, sustained campaign that he planned, executed, and then reported back to her in careful detail. That level of calculation tells you something profound about how he sees her. It tells you something about what that marriage has actually felt like from the inside, and what she has probably been living with for a long time without a name for it. The social fallout is real and it is painful, and she is not wrong to feel sick about it. But here is what tends to happen with this kind of thing over time. People are not as permanently judgmental as they feel in the immediate aftermath. Some of the people he showed those photos to will quietly form their own opinions about a man who thought passing around pictures of his wife's messy house to his coworkers was an appropriate and reasonable thing to do. That discomfort settles in slowly, but it settles. Some of them will side with him loudly, and those people were never going to be in her corner anyway. The ones worth keeping will eventually see the fuller picture, because the fuller picture has a way of emerging. Her dignity is not gone. It has been attacked, which is a very different thing. What she is feeling right now, the numbness, the nausea, the shame that sits in the chest and does not move, those are not signs that he was right. Those are signs that someone who was supposed to be her partner did something cruel, and her body and her heart know it even if she is still struggling to put it into words. The shame belongs to him. It landed on her, because that was his intention, because he aimed it there with great care, but it does not belong to her. She is allowed to set it down. Here is the verdict, and it is not complicated once you see it clearly. He did not take those photos because he was genuinely worried about his children. If he were worried about his children, he would have come home more. He would have helped. He would have had a private, honest conversation with her instead of a coordinated public campaign. He took those photos because he wanted leverage and he wanted to want her, and he wanted to make sure that when this divorce happened she would already feel small and exposed and alone before she ever walked into a courtroom. She is not a bad mother. She is a mother who was left to do everything and still kept 3 kids fed and clothed and moving through a difficult semester while her husband was quietly taking photographs in the background. When she walks into that courtroom, or when she decides not to go back to that therapy room at all, she should know that clearly. The record of who actually showed up for those children is not in his phone's camera roll. It is in every permission slip she signed and every school pickup she made and every night she held things together alone. She asked how to survive this. The answer is 1 foot in front of the other, a good lawyer beside her, and the absolute certainty that what he did reflects his cruelty, not her worth. Drop a comment telling me which story hit you harder. If these got you, a like and subscribe mean the world.